Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Arthur's Roundtable. We've had a flurry of really interesting interviews, which I'm grateful for. And I'm also grateful for the attention that the Family Office Insights community is paid to this podcast, and also grateful for you sharing it with others. And so thank you for that. And we have another very interesting. McKenna is a prior guest who some of you may have seen, and we've recently become acquainted and friendly. And she excitedly and without any reluctance suggested that we speak to Mark, and Mark kindly agreed. And so we're super excited to have this conversation today. You're going to find out in a minute what it's all about. So, Mark, welcome. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it.
So thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here.
It's my honor. Let's start with the beginning of your journey here, where things all began. In fact, your origin story would be great.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm English born and bred. I'm an American citizen now. I've been here for 20 years now. But my hometown is Portsmouth on the south coast of England. I'm just another sort of poor lad in a naval town that grew up, followed my father into the army. I then spent 25 years serving with the British Army and various NATO allies. And the one thing I always convinced myself of was that it doesn't matter where you start in life because you have no control over that. But where you end is entirely up to you. And so I guess some would say I aimed my sights way too high, but I didn't agree, and I decided to push on through with that. My military career was split with special operations and predominantly infantry. I made something of a name of myself within the sphere of sniping and counterterrorism, which saw me then selected by the US government as the expert witness on the Washington, D.C. sniper trial. So I got flown across from the UK, attached to the FBI task force, and then I helped them work through the process of understanding exactly how a sniper would operate, why the person who doesn't pull the trigger is just as important as the person who does. So therefore, both men were as guilty as each other, and obviously with a very successful outcome on that. When I left the army, I don't think there was any real. Well, I didn't have any other skills, to be quite honest. The army had taken up the majority of my adult life at that stage. So I didn't see any reason why I should sort of give that up and drive a bus. So I then did what most soldiers did at that period. I sort of moved into the private security world. And it's a very small world where it's who you know rather than what you know, because the what you know comes with the justification from who you know. So I ended up working for what was they described as the boutique of security, a small company called Jordanian out of central London, where we looked after, corporate entities going into Iraq, etc. And also I looked after the main insurance company in the UK called Hiscox. Now, Hiscox insure the richest 500 people in the UK. So my job for them was when their insurance came up for renewal, they had to have a survey done by me on their place.
Like a risk assessment type.
Absolutely, yes. So they would have to have a risk assessment on their sort of permanent residence and also their business as such if the business was insured as well. So I used then my sort of counter-terrorist skills to work out where I could get past whatever security they currently had. Then did a security survey and a detailed report of what they required. On the back of that, Hiscox would then reinsure or not reinsure, depending on whether they took the advice. Great experience. I got to meet some very famous people and explain to them. And the thing I guess that shocked me most was, as an example, in one room, there could be 2 or 3 paintings worth over $1 million. And my recommendation said that they needed maybe $9,000 worth of security upgrade.
Right.
And they argued. So you're like, okay, that's probably why you're rich. After that, I mean, I'd moved to the US, and I then started working in the defense industry over here. I worked for various defense companies, as well as starting my own company, Osprey. So over the next sort of period or the next decade, I helped establish various companies' training footprints, set up their training, etc., located their ideal place for them to run the training, and then offered their training curriculums for all their different classes that they wanted to teach. based on obviously my experiences, I also became the lead instructor for all of them. It was interesting. You say, whilst I wasn't working for somebody else and working for myself, I got to travel the world. I certainly worked in places like as far adrift as Jordan twice, Sweden. I lived in India for a year while I was working with the Punjab Home Guard. So we were up on the Chinese-Pakistan border. Very interesting place. There's a lot of things that are going up there that don't necessarily hit the news. But I just found the Indian people in general to be extremely hospitable people. We never had a single problem in India. The food takes some getting used to. There's no doubt about that. But I guess once you're used to Indian food, just anything after that is kind of not very hot. So
Right.
so that was a good bonus, and it was a fantastic experience as well to live in that country for that long, to get to know the people, travel around the country, was interesting. And as I say, that was very much the same process. That was establishing a new skill set that the Indian Punjab Regiment didn't have. And then again, authoring all of their training doctrine, teaching their instructors. So the whole train the trainer thing comes in again. And one of the things that I found as I progressed from my time in the army was that the skills that the army or the military in general give you actually transfer very well into the corporate world.
That totally makes sense to me, right? Discipline, making sure things don't fall through the cracks, measuring outcomes, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we're very good at, Arthur, is we're problem solvers. So when something goes wrong, we think on our feet, we find a way to achieve the mission, whatever it is. Now, the one thing that I did find difficult, and I know speaking to other former military guys as well and veterans, is our sense of humor tends not to fit in very well with the civilian world. I've heard it called sort of dark humor and various other things. And it really is a case of finding something to dull the senses to some of the horrific things you see.
Yeah.
And to be able to laugh actually keeps you going. But at the same time, when you transfer to the civilian world and you discover such things as HR, there can be some issues because what we consider funny, some people do not. You know, in the 25 years that I was in the army, the world changed a lot. And it's difficult because it's a culture shock when you leave. Because I retired as a sergeant major in the British Army, so I was a fairly powerful man. That was gone overnight. You know, overnight I lost most of my friends. I lost my power. I lost my position, my integrity in
Chain
life.
of command doesn't really exist, right?
No, gone. And then all of a sudden, I'm at the beck and call of somebody half my age who's telling me why a job can't be done, and I'm trying to tell him it can be done. So yeah, I could kind of understand some of the issues that soldiers have when they come out, and that really led to a book I wrote that I'll talk about later on if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
Because it became obvious to me that that was a major problem for veterans coming out of the military, was trying to fit back in. Now, the military spend up to 9 months changing you from a civilian into a soldier, where they will literally mentally strip you down and rebuild you into what they need. And it's a requirement. It's not. I've heard people say about, oh, they shout too much and you can't scream and shout at these people. You've got to be nicer to them. No, you don't. Because from day one, soldiers are being conditioned for what we call conduct after capture. Your enemy's not going to tickle you and make you a cup of tea, right? They're going to
worry about whether they trigger you or not.
Yep.
And if you don't mind me saying, at least in this country, the world has become ultra sensitive to everything. And so you can't even be funny anymore without offending somebody.
Absolutely.
And it's sad because you have to be some people are in a position where they have to be mindful of that, especially in the corporate environment. And I'm only stopping you because, the pendulum has swung so far in this country. And I love this country. I'm not disparaging it at all. I think it's fantastic to be here in so many ways. And I prospered as a result. And so have my family, and enjoy the freedom that we have here. But, when you have to worry about cracking a joke and then someone's going to call HR and then you're going to get called to the mat by somebody half your age to tell you that wasn't right. It's sort of like, lighten up, take a joke. It's funny. Move
Hmm.
on. Right.
Well, that was one of the main things that I realized had changed. When I went into the army, if somebody said they were offended, you apologized. They actually said it to your face and they gave you a chance to apologize.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, nobody means to upset anybody. Nobody means to offend anybody. It's just we all have different senses of humor on different levels sometimes. But when I came out, it was a case of they didn't tell me I'd offended them. They would tell
Yeah. They ran
HR.
to mommy.
Yeah,
Right.
and as a soldier, that was very hard to get used to because you're like, just come and tell me.
Yeah.
If I offended you and I didn't mean to, I will apologize.
Sure.
So that was very difficult. And I think working within the defense industry was almost like a safety net. Working with exactly the same people that you'd been in the military with, got the same sense of humor, weren't easily upset, but you knew you could rely on them. You knew when things went wrong, they weren't going to run. So yeah, that was actually very, very good, and I enjoyed it. Now, obviously, within the space of the defense industry, a lot of people in the defense industry are not veterans; they're civilians or engineers, or people that have got a different skill set than me, and I value that because one of the things the military teaches you is how to make a team, and the whole purpose of a team is you pull people around you that can do something better than you can. You may have an understanding in that topic, but you pull somebody in who is a subject matter expert, and then that's the person you lean on for that topic. Now, the other thing that the special operations side of life teaches is everybody gets an opinion. So the problem is put out there. Everybody gives an opinion on how best to solve it. But the boss, the commander, is the man who makes the final decision. And then everybody just falls into line behind that decision, whether it was their idea or not. And it works. So I value the skill sets that the civilians around me brought to the table that I most certainly didn't have. And I had no qualms at all about leaning on those people or going to those people for advice because I didn't know. And I think one of the hardest things for most people to do, male or female, in any position, is sometimes accept somebody could do it better than you. And that's what a team is. I established a reputation for building teams, and I ended up between different companies to solve problems. In some cases, I solved the problem and then looked for a new challenge. In some cases, the people that brought me in to solve the problem didn't listen, so it was absolutely pointless me staying there. So I moved to a different challenge. I guess really one of my biggest claims to fame was I just finished actually working in India, and I got a phone call saying that a member of the Jordanian royal family was trying to reach me, which I just brushed off as as a joke until I got a phone call. His Royal Highness Prince Talal called me, and they then pointed out that they wanted to talk to me about a project they had coming up. And Prince Talal flew to Phoenix, just where I live now. Uh, 3 days later, he flew to Phoenix. We sat down over a 3 or 4 day period. We looked at the problem. I gave him my thoughts on the problem, and then they offered me a contract to go to Jordan and change it. And what it was they wanted to bring their sniping skills, equipment, and training curriculum up to a standard that would be closer to the US and the UK standards. So I put together a team. People I'd either trained personally or I knew personally. And they crossed the whole spectrum of British Special Forces through to American Special Forces, Marines and Army. So we had a lot of knowledge in a 6-man team. We then spent the next 3 years we assessed everything they had, including their frontline positions. ISIS were a very big problem at that stage for Jordan. We then standardized their equipment. It amazes me that we have such a famous person as Napoleon who pointed out to everybody, you want to win a war, standardize. Or your cannons are the same, or your ammunition's the same.
But supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still travel the world and find that to be not the case in a lot of places. There are a lot of ivory towers when you go to different countries, Jordan being one of them. One prince controlled one regiment, another prince controlled another regiment. Well, King Abdullah gave me full authority to just scrap that and start again. And we literally did remove the qualifications from everybody who was a qualified sniper and make them go through training again. I wasn't popular for a while,
I bet.
but I was being paid to be popular. I was being paid to achieve an aim. And I was lucky. I worked directly to King Abdullah's office. The only person I answered to on a day-to-day basis was Prince Talal. And we became very good friends even now. So anytime I had an issue, I just spoke to Prince Talal, who not only a prince, but he was also a brigadier general. They commissioned me and my team into the Jordanian Royal Guard. I got commissioned as a lieutenant colonel. My second in command was a major, and my other instructors were all made captains, so that we had the military authority to get the job done without people. Well, you're a civilian, you can't tell me how to
Questioning,
do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
were also trusted and cleared to carry firearms 24/7. So, and I spent a lot of time in offices alone with His Majesty the King. So we were definitely trusted. And our initial remit, if you like, expanded quite considerably once we were in country, down to I planned and oversaw a lot of state visits. King Salman from Saudi coming into Jordan. I planned and covered the sniper coverage for that. The Arab Summit with all 22 Arab states, I planned and commanded that on the sniper side, opening a
Yeah.
state parliament. There were a lot of stuff, and that included aerial platform, snipers in helicopters, down to snipers hiding in the desert, just watching road junctions, etc.
Did you have to learn the language, or was that not an issue?
No, I mean, they gave us the option to go to their Arabic language school, which we did, but we had interpreters with us 24/7. And to be fair, a lot of the Jordanians spoke very good English.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
bet.
Prince Talal certainly speaks English better than I do. So yeah, it wasn't anywhere near as challenging as we expected it to be. And the Jordanian people, very much like the Indian people, absolutely lovely people. They welcomed us in every aspect of their life. We were involved in everything from visiting some of the Bedouin families, the Jordanian Royal Guard of Bedouin, all the way down to shooting the young prince and princesses at paintball games. So we really were absorbed into their system and treated very, very kindly.
That had to be super exciting.
It really was. It would have been easy to let it go to your head. I mean, I could, as a lieutenant colonel, I would walk into a brigadier's office and I'd get treated like the guest because they knew I worked directly for Prince Talal and they didn't want to upset Prince Talal. But I was always very careful, to salute when it was appropriate to do so, pay the normal respects. There is a very clear cultural routine, I would say, when you visit somebody. There is tea, there is water, there is cakes, and there's either more tea, and then there's sort of Turkish coffee, which kind of is the thing that finishes the meeting. So, and to just say, no, I don't want that, is deemed to be a little bit rude. So
Yeah.
you learn to follow the process. You learn all of the small stuff that can actually be offensive. You don't shake hands with your left hand. You don't show people the soles of your feet, which is all considered to be rude in their culture. But they were also extremely accommodating in understanding that it wasn't our culture. But they certainly appreciated when we put the effort in to live as we would live and understand what they would do. And the hardest thing, I think, for me was Prince Talal is a cancer survivor, very strong, very dignified man, probably one of the best soldiers I've certainly met. But he was vehemently against smoking, which anybody that's been to the Middle East, everybody still smokes a lot. So when he made the sniper school, because I designed the sniper facility and then I project managed its construction, and then ran it for a year before we handed it over to the guy I was mentoring. When he made that facility non-smoking, that was quite difficult to enforce because they really didn't like not smoking. But rules are rules. Pritchard was the boss. When he said it couldn't be done, then we had to make sure it wasn't.
Was he a smoker and that's what caused the cancer?
I believe so. Certainly, I thought one night I was being amazingly cultural, and I told him, we'd been out for coffee and everything, and I had a hubbly bubbly and all the rest of the stuff, just the big sort of container that you kind of smoke and suck, and it's flavored, etc. And he went mad at me because he was like, he's like, Colonel, promise me you will never do that again. That is like smoking 20 cigarettes in one go.
Yeah, it's pretty rough stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but I just thought it was one of those fun cultural things to do, and it tasted like apple. Didn't even taste
Yeah.
like a cigarette, but it was like that's how
Right.
they get you. They flavor it.
Yeah.
I'd say that was a very interesting 3 years. I then obviously came back to the States. COVID kind of hit not so long after that, which caused an awful lot of problem because nobody had any training budgets and everything was shut down. So it became a difficult time. But I took that time up initially as part of like a challenge. It had come out that 22 veterans a day in the UK and in the US were committing suicide. Some of my friends from the army, that we all challenged each other that you had to do 22 push-ups a day out of respect, but you had to video it because nobody trusts anybody in the military. And then we were encouraged to tell a small story of anything that had gone wrong in our life and how we got through it. Well, I lost my wife to suicide. That's probably the worst thing that had happened in my
Ouch.
life.
Sorry to hear that.
No,
Ouch.
it's okay. It was, yeah, it's coming on for 15 years ago now. Am I over it? No, I don't think you ever are. Do I manage it? Absolutely. But at the time, it was absolutely devastating. My wife shot herself in the room next to me. I obviously heard the gunshot.
Wow.
Told myself it wasn't a gunshot because I didn't want it to be.
Hmm.
But for me, and I guess even to this day, the hardest thing for me was calling her name and then the silence that followed. I found her on our bedroom floor. It was pretty obvious what she'd done. And then you kind of, the army just takes over because I remember in my head, I just thought breathing, bleeding, breaks, burns. And they've kind of changed that order nowadays, but that was the sequence that was hammered into my head. And I could tell from where she collapsed, there wasn't enough room to work on her. So I just grabbed her by a shirt and I dragged her across the floor to the open space at the end of the bed. She wasn't breathing. So I knew there was no point doing anything else unless I could get her to breathe. I remember I hooked into her mouth and there was a lot of stuff in her throat. I pulled all that out. And she suddenly took this huge breath in. Hope is a wonderful thing and a terrible thing at the same time.
Yeah.
So that hope that it was going to be okay drove me to keep trying. I got her breathing. I could see the entry wound. It was directly under her chin, but I couldn't find the exit wound. It wasn't where I expected it to be. And there was a little bit of panic. I'm not going to lie. Not being able to find the exit wound and therefore stop the bleeding caused a lot of anxiety. So I eventually came up with a plan. If I sat on the floor and I pulled her up against me, so her back was on my chest, I could keep my t-shirt underneath her chin, and by elevating the wound, I would naturally slow the blood flow from the exit wound. I'd already called the police and the paramedics. I'd already shut my two German shepherds away because I didn't particularly want them getting shot, and I'd left the front door open so they could come in quicker. And it took them around 12 minutes to get there, and that was probably the longest 12 minutes of my life. And the thing that gave me hope again was she kept lifting her feet individually, placing them on the floor, and then she would push like she was trying to stand up. And she did that about 3 times to the point that I had to tell her to stop because she was increasing the blood flow. She tried again when the paramedics arrived because I heard them tell her to stop doing it. The last time I saw her was when they put her on the helicopter. They wouldn't let me on it. They said there wasn't room. Sadly, by the time I got to the hospital, she was gone. They got her to the hospital, but she didn't make it. So COVID presented me with a challenge.
By the way, Mark, thank you for having the strength to share that with us.
No, I want to, because one of the things I'd like to talk about is the book, and she was the inspiration for me to write that book. Because when I found out there were 22 veterans a day committing suicide, and that we'd lost more the soldiers to suicide than we had in the conflicts, something's got to be done. After about day 3 of doing this 22 push-ups a day, a lot of my friends were saying, you've got to write a book. Now, I'd written 4 books on sniping already, but that was just That's technical. That's writing about something I did. That was easy. And they just kept pushing me to write this book. And in the end, I kind of agreed. And I realized PTSD is wrong. Calling it a disorder, it's not a disorder, it's an injury. But by calling it a disorder, nobody's coming forward. Nobody wants to be labeled with the word disorder. So
That totally makes sense to me.
I decided the book was going to be about that it is post-traumatic stress, or as post-traumatic stress injury. And I wanted to write a book that gave people a roadmap of how to survive, because one of the things that I was asked was, you survived that. You've got to tell people how you survived it. And I'm brutally honest in the book. I mean, and I'll be brutally honest with you now. The best part of 3 years, I put a gun in my mouth almost daily because I just couldn't deal with it. I would start fights. Me and my friend would start fights whenever we went out. And it wasn't until I wrote the book that I realized why. And that came down to the simple fact is soldiers are trained to deal with pain, physical pain. All men are taught as they grow up to deal with physical pain. You know, your dad will push you back into a fight.
Be tough. Yeah. Be tough.
You've got to be tough or you're going to be walked over. And I found that all the time I was in physical pain, the mental pain stopped, because it was the mental pain I couldn't deal with. My daughter flew over. She was a police officer in London. She flew over to sort of take care of me for a while. But it was when she was out and I was in the house on my own, that was when I picked a gun up. And the only reason I'm alive today is those 2 German Shepherds. That's a fact.
Mm.
They knew every time I hit a low point, and they knew every time I picked a gun up, there was a problem, and they both landed in my lap. So I couldn't get the gun to my head.
Yeah. It's amazing how dialed in animals are, especially
They knew.
dogs.
They absolutely knew. And so I decided I would write a book. But I realized I had to get across to the world that it isn't a military condition. It's a human condition. There's the kid who's getting bullied at school, the wife or the woman who's in an abusive relationship, a young nurse, doctor who's just lost a patient that they've fought so hard to save, a police officer or a firefighter who's just had to cut somebody out of a car and seen what speeding and smashed into the back of a truck does to a human body. It isn't just the military, it's a human condition. So I wanted people to stop calling it a disorder. And I wanted to get across that the government needs to spend money on it because it isn't a military condition, it's a human condition. And nobody's coming forward because civilians won't say, I think I've got PTSD or I've got PTSI, because they're convinced you can't. You haven't been to war. Now, do soldiers see the worst that mankind can do to each other? Absolutely, we do. But it's no less or more traumatic than picking a young kid up out of a burnt out house that you couldn't get to. It's no less traumatic than being terrified of going to school because you're going to be abused all day, or worrying when you hear the key in the door when your drunk husband's coming home and he's going to beat you around the house. There's no difference. So I realized the book wasn't going to be about me as a soldier. It was going to be about my life. So I sat down and I went through stories, and I think the first one really when I was about 5 or 6. And then I picked points through my life that from eventually going to a therapist, I found out had actually seriously affected my life, and I just buried it.
Buried trauma.
Yeah. And
So I don't want you to stop your thought process, but I'd like to ask you, what catalyzed you going from, I'm having this really bad time in my mind and my daughter's here, and when she's gone, I feel like taking my life, to actually saying, okay, I've got to pull my shit together and write this book, and maybe I could have an impact that way. And so I've got to pull myself together to get that done. What was the catalyst?
Well, for me, it was a case of every time my sort of depression, PTSI, whichever you want to call it, it feels like you are spiraling down out of control. Something triggers you. And one of the things that my therapist taught me, because I wouldn't go to a therapist for over a decade. My attitude was, I'm a big, tough soldier. I can deal with this. And I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong. But they taught me what my triggers were. So now I know the feeling of when it's starting, and I now know how I can stop it, because a therapist will teach you everything from meditation to breathing exercises that calms you down and stops it. Because it felt like I was spiraling out of control. And the way I explained it was, every curve was almost me ticking something off. House is sorted, kids are sorted, bills are sorted. And the only reason I never got to the bottom of that spiral was 2 German Shepherds, because they would interrupt that thought process. And when they interrupted that thought process and I stopped thinking about it and I thought about something else, hope popped in. And I would shout at the dogs. There were even times I literally threw them off to my detriment, and they hit the ground and came straight back and landed on me
Like,
again.
yeah,
And I would literally out loud say sometimes, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. You got it. I won't do it. And I'd put the gun down. So I put the gun down. They just laid either side of me. If I went anywhere near that gun, they climbed on top of me. And that, you learn to deal with grief better every day. And I eventually said to myself, I just got to get to tomorrow. And when I get to tomorrow, I've just got to get to tomorrow. And I did it one day at a time. I had a plan. I was going to follow her on the first anniversary. I absolutely had a plan. And one friend stopped me because we went out drinking that night. Everyone thought I was great. I was playing a role. And this is one of the things about, PTSI is you shut yourself down and you play a game so nobody really knows what's going on in your life because you don't want to be interrupted. And on the actual first year anniversary of her death, we were all out drinking one night, and I was pretending to be drinking and everything else, and I really wasn't. And I just wait until everyone was having a good time, because 8:45 at night was when she pulled the trigger. 8:40, I slipped out the back door of the bar and I went out into the darkened car lot and just sat on the wall. I had a 10-11 on my hip, and I was just waiting. And then, literally about a minute before, a voice out the dark, which was one of my friends, just said to me, "What are you doing?" He'd noticed I was gone. And I said, "Oh, I'm just getting some fresh air, go back in, I'll be fine." And he sat next to me on the wall and he just said, "Well, if you're going to do it, I'm going to sit here with you." And he broke the moon. He broke that spiral down. And I didn't. And there's always a reason not to do it. And normally anything that interrupts that downward spiral, something pops that reason into your head. At one stage, I can remember thinking, well, I might as well stay until 2012 and see if the world ends.
the Mayan calendar or whatever it was.
If the Mayans are wrong,
Yeah.
I'll do it then.
Yeah, right.
But you literally get stronger and stronger every day. So in writing the book, I wrote up a whole series of things I got wrong in life and how it led to the fact that my wife's suicide pretty much pushed me over the edge. Nothing in my military career was that drastic. I got blown up. I've seen various other things. Nothing bothered me, but not being able to save my wife, that bothered me a lot.
That would screw you up pretty
And
badly.
I was determined to end it, but on my terms. And I believe in God. I don't necessarily believe in religion, but I do believe that there is a God somewhere. Whether you want to call it God, the universe, whatever you want to call it.
I don't think there's any doubt, Mark, that there's something divine.
Oh, I don't
doesn't
see it.
matter what you have faith in, because it's pretty clear something's going on.
It's too perfect.
It's almost impossible to believe that there isn't some divinity, and you don't have to attach yourself to a dogma to embrace that, right?
Absolutely. And for the people that go to me, science, you go, how many times in science have people said, this is absolute? And then someone like Einstein comes along and they go, okay, we were wrong. So when they say to me, well, prove there's a God, my answer is prove there isn't.
Yeah.
It's much harder for you to prove there isn't.
Totally.
And when you look at the way that the universe is constructed and how much we find out almost every day, is too perfect for me. It's just too perfect to be this random solution. So for me, it was God. Every day, would put something in front of me to stop me pulling that trigger. So I wrote the book. And one of the things I put in the book was it never truly goes. It's always, and I explained it that you kind of walk into the darkness inside your own head. And the further down that spiral you go, the deeper into the dark you get until you get lost. You have no way to find your way out. And all the time, the darkness is trying to convince you it's your friend. You really would be better off on the other side. You're ruining everybody else's life. And you end up listening. I think that's what happens to a lot of people.
Making arguments with yourself,
Yep.
right?
You whether you're arguing with yourself or whether you're arguing with the devil, I don't know. But you're
Yeah.
arguing with somebody. And you know how when you come into your own house, you know exactly where the light switch is and you hit
Mhm.
it every time I turn it on. That's familiarity. That's muscle memory, like playing darts, etc. Well, when you start walking into the darkness of your own head, you don't know where the light switch is. Pretty soon you're lost. And the darkness suddenly becomes your only friend. And I try to convey that in the book of how I felt. And I had no idea what I was going to call it. And I was writing down various names that the book could be called. And then just something inside my head just said, Outdance the Devil. And I just went, okay, that's it.
Perfect.
The
Perfect.
book's Outdance the Devil. Now, I don't know whether I did this on purpose or whether I'm just really bad at English, but I made outdance one word. So it's outdance the devil instead of separate words. Why? I don't know. But I just heard that voice in my head and I wrote it down, and that's pretty much what it is. Now that was a good few years ago now, but the initial publisher I just didn't feel was looking to achieve the same things I was looking to achieve. I wanted to save lives. I wanted to get people to stop calling it a disorder. It's an injury. And the doctor that worked with me on part of the book explained it best. He said, your brain is no different than your little finger. If you break it, you can heal it. It can be repaired. But the longer you take to treat it, the harder it is to fix. And he said, we really don't know that much about the brain, even now.
Yeah.
But for me, the first time I went to a therapist, one of the first questions she asked me, well, she said, what is your very first memory from being a child? And I can remember thinking, what the heck has that got to do with what I'm here for? And then within 2 minutes later, I'd remembered the very first thing I could remember, and I was bawling my eyes out. And it was my dad kicked me up the bus when I was about 5 or 6 in front of the whole family. And everyone burst out laughing. And my dad was my hero. So that crushed me. And I ended up running upstairs in tears. My mum come found me, and then my dad got the worst day of his life. But that
Yeah.
stuck with me. And then she asked me, what's your first or worst memory about your mum? There was one. And we basically went through my life. And as I was listening, I was writing the book because I was thinking, okay, all of these things shaped who I became. My fears, my prejudices, and everything else was created in my youth. And then the army added to it. And the whole man up syndrome that we all face means you just bury it. They even tell you, forget it, bury it, move on. And to be quite honest, as a soldier, you have to. Other people's lives are at stake, especially if you're a leader. You have to keep going. But you also have to remember you need to get it out. And for me, that became crying. All my life, I was told and trained men don't cry. We should. Because that to me that's the body's way of emptying the tank. So now I say to people, if you get to that stage where you're tearful, go somewhere quiet if you want to, but bawl your eyes out until you can't cry anymore. And you'll feel great afterwards. And you do. And it's like someone just emptied the tank. Now you can take the world on again. But if you keep burying it, eventually you're going to blow. Sometimes, depending on other things that have happened in your life, that isn't pretty for the rest of the world. And I think with all the cutbacks and everything else and mental health issues and all the rest of it, that's caused a problem. But hopefully the book has done some good. I certainly still get a lot of emails from people I've never met that just thank me for writing the book and saying that until I'd written it in the book, they thought they were the only people that felt like they were spiraling out of control. So I just wrote the book as honestly as I possibly could after. But it took a while for me to publish it because I thought it made me look weak and a fool. So I sent the manuscript to several people I truly trust, mentors of mine, very, very close friends of mine. Same question. Does this make me look stupid? That's an ego issue. Um,
Totally.
but we all have them. But I was thinking,
Mhm.
and I was also thinking, is this going to affect my career? And people are going to read this and go, I'm not deploying him. He's a lunatic or he's weak. Every one of them said, you have to publish this book. So I did. And most of them wrote references for me in the first couple of pages of the book. And it's been a success so far, but I'm looking to reboot the book because I don't think my initial publisher published it in the way that I wanted to. It was only ever on Amazon. I didn't do the audio book because I didn't agree with the way they were doing it. So I'd like to kind of reboot that and get that back out there again. And at the moment, our mutual friend McGanna and another very good friend of mine are doing their best to have it made into a movie because they agree with the message and they're trying to get the message out there to the whole world.
What do you think? It's clear. Let me ask it differently. I have always been puzzled by how badly the U.S. treats their veterans because one could argue without much resistance that these people deserve the best healthcare. They deserve the best to reintegrate. They deserve almost everything because they're preserving freedom for the rest of us.
Very
And
true.
I don't know how the citizenry of the UK feel about that, but let's just talk about the US because that's the
The
only thing
UK is worse, 10 times worse.
yeah.
The UK people love their veterans, they love their military. The UK government does absolutely nothing for veterans.
And is it, I've tried to process that, and maybe you're onto something here. And I mean that in the most affectionate way, not with doubt, is that if you treat it as a condition rather when something like in your experience with the military, the mission is this and you got thrown a curve, then you pivot and you adjust to get the mission done. With the military treatment of the treatment of our veterans in the U.S., there's no urgency. These people are just floundering, and nobody's feet are held to the fire to make it right. There's no really a threat of something else happening if we don't do that. It sort of gets wasted away in some, we have the problem like a lot of other democracies have in that we spend money on things that say they're going to have some impact, but no one ever measures it like you would in a business. And so it's just the optics that get accolades, but no result.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I always thought that nobody's being held accountable for the outcomes. So that's why it doesn't get better.
I mean, I've said to various businesses that I've been speaking about that it's because obviously I've done a lot on the security side of life. And one of the things I used to do was we would try and gain entry to corporate locations by lying, deceiving, passing their security, whatever. And to be honest, it was very easy. And one of the things I've suggested to multiple companies is if you have a lot of CCTV cameras where somebody's got to sit and watch a screen all day long, employ a disabled veteran. They're already trained observers. They're already
Yeah.
security aware. They have to sit down. There's not much they can do, but you're giving them a chance to be involved again, be important again, have a mission again.
Make a valuable contribution. Yeah.
They've got all those skills that never get tapped because maybe they can't walk up and down stairs. Put them in front of a screen. Let them do your security for you. Let them send the able-bodied people to where the problem is. They'd be great at it. And I'm always looking for teams like that to put together. The current project I'm working on at the moment with Granite Valley Group is we're looking at converting a high-end horse property with 5-star accommodation, everything else on it already, into a very exclusive training and conference facility, not just for the high-end military, but also for corporate. Like you can host corporate retreats there, corporate team building. One of the things we want to do is we want to host, traumatic injury military veterans down there on sort of weekends. Let them all get together and feel important again. That's the thing I'm working on at the moment. And one of that thing is, we're going to have CCTV cameras down there. One of the things I've put forward again is the best people we can have operating the drones, operating the cameras, are disabled veterans because they have a security training embedded in them already. Their hands are great. Their brains are great. They could work a drone probably better than
Mhm.
me, to be quite honest. At that stage, we're in the early stages. We're still looking for investors into that, but that's going to incorporate multiple aspects. It's in Texas, so we have a lot of scope to run everything from private security training and net worth individuals who want to learn to defend themselves and their families, or get some of the very experienced SF guys to come down and host an evening with, where everyone's comfortable. There's an 8-foot security fence around the whole location. Nobody's getting in that we don't want in, and give something back to the country, both on the corporate level. Put a skiff in down there, so whether it's the military or corporate, they can do all their business in total privacy and also have the luxury that maybe they're used to. So we're always looking to improve and give back. And one thing I want to do now is give back to what is now my country, America. I'm a very proud American now. So I gave 25 years of my life to the British Army and the UK. Now I'd like to give whatever time I've got left to the US. And that includes, this current project we're doing now and as many other projects as I can get my hands on. I'm unlikely to retire. I think if I retire, I'll either get in trouble or I'll just die.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think retirements, things have changed. I've always felt like I've said this before. My sister had really no idea what I do for the longest time. I'm just an investor connecting the dots. But she said, "So what are you in Arizona or no?" No, she said, "Are you in Colorado?" I said, "No, I'm in Utah for part of the time." She goes, "Are you retired?" I said, "Why would I ever do that?"
Yeah, no. My idea of retirement is I have a better control on my calendar, and that's nice. But no, I'm not stopping. Life's too
Yeah.
short to stop.
Oh,
And there's there's
I'm actually
still
having way too much
there's still
fun,
so
right?
much in here from my
Yeah,
life that isn't
yeah,
in a book.
totally.
It isn't in a document anywhere. I just want to give it back. Otherwise, we do this. I learn it. Nobody records it. Somebody else spends in all these years to learn what I already know down here. We need to transfer knowledge better.
So what would be helpful in relation to not just the book and the movie, but having people look at it the way you've been able to discern that it's not a condition, it's an injury. What would be helpful for people to get to that point? And let me ask also, are people more willing to step forward to say, I have an injury that's caused this? Because seemingly they would, rather than a condition to get help.
Absolutely. And the most obvious example is TBI. Traumatic brain injury is now a recognized injury for military operators. You can't be blowing things up, shooting guns and various other stuff without your brain getting knocked around. Now, 90% of us seem to be okay, but there are guys that really suffer from TBI, but it's injury. They're not calling it traumatic brain disorder. They're calling it traumatic brain injury. So I guess whether it's Mr. Kennedy at the top of the tree or whether it's just getting, the medical profession to stop calling it a disorder, then people come forward. We get injured from the time we're born upwards. We don't mind being injured. There's a certain element that says chicks like scars and people like stories. We'll do that for an injury. I'm not talking about a disorder.
Yeah,
That makes me
exactly.
sound weak. That makes me
Yeah,
sound like I can't be fixed or that maybe I'm some time bomb waiting to go off.
yeah,
So people won't come forward. I mean, I certainly didn't. I didn't want to talk to anybody about. And when I was first told, you're suffering PTSD and deep depression from your wife's suicide, my first answer was, no, I'm not. I'm
yeah.
fine.
Of course.
Yeah, no, I'm not. They went,
No, I'm
"You
not.
are." And they explained, "Okay, do you do this? Do you feel this? Do you?" Yeah, yeah. And I was like, "It's not a disorder. I do not have a disorder." So, but if they said to me, "You have a brain injury," I would have accepted it immediately and said, "How do I fix it?"
Yeah, how do I fix it? Have you explored and have any thoughts or comments on the whole trauma healing talk that goes around psilocybin and ibogaine and those type of modalities? Have you had any exposure to that?
I have not. No, yeah, I know there's a lot of good things being done towards it now, but usually comes down to lack of funding, or people won't come forward because they're not admitted to a disorder. I even had an American Special Forces friend say to me, "I will not," and this was President Biden was still in position at that stage, and the whole gun lobby were trying to ban guns. And he said, "I am not ever admitting to a disorder because somebody eventually will use that to take my guns off of me."
Take my guns away.
Yeah,
That's
and
exactly right.
so he wouldn't even go and see a doctor just in case. He didn't want anything on a medical record that said disorder. So you're not going to get people come forward. And the sad thing about that is it's higher than 22 a day now. So it's not getting better.
So sad.
And
Yeah.
this is guys and girls who just don't feel they have anywhere to turn. And one of the things I can tell you I experienced was I isolated myself because the first thing you do is you call your friends, your military friends, and you say, "I'm not doing well. I think I need help." And they tell you the only thing they've ever been trained to tell you. "You're fine. You can do this. You're strong
Yeah.
enough.
Suck it up.
Man
Right.
up." Man up comes out every time. And then you hang up the phone and for about 10 minutes you feel, "Yeah, that was good." And then you suddenly go, "I'm a burden. I've just let them down. They're in the army. They're still risking their lives. I'm a burden." And you never call your friends after that.
Yeah.
And then
Wow.
you start never going out.
That's really important to share, Mark, because it's what you said. I hadn't thought about it that way, except in the context of, for example, we have friends that like to smoke marijuana, but they won't get a credentialed license to buy it because they don't want their guns taken away.
Mhm.
Right? Makes sense,
It
right?
absolutely does. And,
Yeah.
people say to me multiple times, "I'm never, ever been listed as having a disorder." And I think the medical profession, they know it isn't a disorder. They know it's an injury. Dr. Sunder actually pointed out to me, it's a brain injury. It can be
Yeah.
fixed.
Yeah.
I just want the medical profession to stop calling it a disorder so we can actually start helping people, stop people taking their own lives.
You have a copy of the book there to hold up handy?
I can get one. Give me 30 seconds.
Yeah. Take your time.
Almost missed the chair then.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the book.
There we go. Outdance the devil.
Yeah, I mean,
Set
they
as a
came up with
killer.
a great cover.
Yeah. Scary.
And an interesting line that I can't claim credit for. And, the subtitle is a sniper's account of the scariest enemy he ever fought.
Yeah.
Me.
It's a good line. Like what's that? Yeah.
And it is true. Nobody's ever scared me in my life, apart from me, when I thought about giving up 2, 3 times a day. That I would have missed all this, and I say to people now, you never know what's just around the corner. So get to tomorrow. Once you get to tomorrow. Because eventually you'll be going to get to the end of the week. Then you'll be going to get to the end of the month. Then you'll be thinking about next year. Will you have days that are very difficult? Absolutely. I still have days where I don't particularly know why. I just become very tearful. And I've learned to understand that that's just me saying, probably full up.
Yeah.
I need to empty. I need to go and empty the tank. Fine today. Not a problem at all. Don't have suicidal thoughts. Loving life. But there was a time when all I wanted was my life to be over. But being a soldier and having kids and things to look after, I had to put everything. I had to have a plan. I had to put everything in order before I could do this, because otherwise, I consider myself to be selfish, and that led me to believe that I've heard people say that suicide is cowardly. It most certainly is not. It takes a lot of courage, not knowing really what's on the other side, and pull that trigger, swallow those tablets, jump off that bridge.
Hmm.
But it is selfish. You don't mean to be selfish. You're in a horrible, dark place. You definitely don't need to be selfish. You think you're doing everybody a favor. But all you actually do is you transfer all of that pain that's just stopped in you, everybody who loved you, because everybody else will do what I did. And they will then wonder, why wasn't I strong enough? Why didn't she talk to me? Why didn't she tell me what was going on?
Yeah, that's the selfish part, right?
And you destroy yourself because you couldn't save them. You don't
Yeah.
mean to be selfish. You know, when I was in that place, the reason I had a plan was because I wanted to make sure it was as easy on other people. I even planned to lay out plastic on the floor so they could clean me up much easier because I knew some poor police officer or paramedic was going to have to find me.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that to happen. But it was still going to be amazingly selfish to my son and my daughter, my mum, to my friends and colleagues who maybe had just seen me an hour or the day before. And there would be times I'd go out drinking with all my friends and then I'd be either solo pie. But the second I came back through my front door, I collapsed. I just collapsed to the floor and didn't want to move.
Would you say that you've said it in some ways that the therapy definitely helped?
Absolutely. I had no time for therapists whatsoever until I went to one. And then I realized that these people actually are very, very good at walking you down an alleyway in a route that you don't want to go down. It's for your own good, but they make you face things that you don't want to face. And me as a roughy, tufty soldier, I didn't want to have it pointed out to me that I wasn't strong enough. You know, I didn't want it pointed out to me that I was making mistakes, that I was ill, I had an injury and I didn't know it. And I had to face it. Yeah, I didn't like it, but it was probably the best thing I ever did. And I strongly recommend people go to see a therapist.
Yeah,
They're very good at what
arguably,
they do.
and the argument has been historically is that you need to talk to somebody who doesn't have skin in the game.
Mhm.
Your friends, your family, somebody that it's not that they're not going to be square with you, but they have skin in the game to maybe lie to you a little bit to keep you from.
And they do. Your friends most definitely lie to you because they're trying to help you. They're not sure you can take the truth. My only advice on a therapist would be I went to 3 different therapists in one day, like an initial assessment where they wanted to speak to me. And I then chose the one I felt most comfortable with. And that worked for me because I think there's going to be good and bad therapists, you know,
Of
and I
course.
think a lot of it is whether you click with them. So I went to see 3 in one day and I chose the one that I felt most comfortable with. And then stuck with it. My initial attitude was, why do I go to therapists? You know, they'll listen to me for an hour, then I've got to leave. And if I run out of money, they don't want to listen to me at all. So
Right.
I decided it was fake and I wasn't going to do it. And I was wrong. I was 100% wrong.
What got you over the hump to go to the therapist to begin with?
Um,
Like it beyond that, I don't want to go to a therapist
I think it was
viewpoint.
realizing I wasn't getting past wanting to end my life. But it took me a decade. It was a decade before I went to a therapist. I'd say the first 3 years were the worst. You, there are things I apparently did during those 3 years that I still have no recollection of,
Hmm.
and I think the brain very, very specifically shuts things out for your own mental well-being.
I'm going to get this wrong, but they say trauma is the thief, right?
And it was then that there were a couple of other things that went wrong in my life in that 10 years where I certainly got to the stage where you think, okay, enough. I've tried. I've tried to get back on my feet. I cannot get up again. And then I just read a meme that said, get knocked down 7 times, get up 8. And then the army side of me come in, I've never quit. And I went, you know what? I'm not going to do this. I won't quit. But if I had to pick one thing that saved my life, dogs,
Dogs.
without doubt, my dogs. I'm a
Yeah.
great believer that dog is God spelled backwards for a reason. And if there's ever an angel on this planet, it's got 4 legs and fur.
Yeah, boy, they are so dialed in.
They
They know
they can feel what
exactly
you're
what's going.
feeling. They know
Yeah,
when they're needed.
yeah.
And you could take the trash out and they're just happy to see you when you come back in the door. There's a joke in England that says, how do you know that dog is man's best friend? And the answer being, you lock your wife and your dog in the garage for an hour and see which one's pleased to see you when you open the door. So pretty true. But no, I've got 7 of them now, as we spoke about at the beginning.
Good for you. Yeah.
They're all German shepherds. I don't know whether that was a mistake or whether God thinks I've got some more trauma to come yet, and I'm going to need more than 2. But they most certainly make any day brighter.
Yeah, the German Shepherds are great too. But it's not really a joke, but in the US, we say that the reason why we love our dogs so much is because they don't know how to be anything but themselves.
That itself is very true as well. And to me, they're the most perfect example of what unconditional love is.
It totally,
You could not feed them, leave them, kick them, whatever, and they're still happy to see you.
yeah,
Not that I would ever kick
totally,
my dogs, I hasten to add.
yeah,
And if somebody ever comes to try and take them off me, that'll be the day I die. There'll be a
yeah,
fight
right.
over that.
I believe it. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to have them, and it's also, I have 3 adult children, and we always had dogs, and it really gives them perspective on life, right?
Oh, absolutely. It gives them something to take care of because the dog needs you. The
Yeah,
dog's going to starve without you. But I don't
yeah,
think it's by mistake that the medical profession is now issuing sort of therapy dogs.
yeah,
And, they're
totally.
allowing dogs into hospitals because they've realized the power the dog has in rebooting someone's determination to live. I think there's so much more we can learn from them and animals
No,
in general, to be honest. I mean,
yep,
I've
I
watched
agree.
I've watched horses and even dolphins, with disabled kids, and they're amazing,
They are amazing.
absolutely amazing. But we certainly haven't earned the title of mankind. We may be man, but kind we most certainly are not 90% of the time.
Well, the the Buddhists, and you've experienced the people in India, and I just call them the Buddhists because I don't know what else to call them, but they seem to get the loving kindness pretty locked up, like they figured it out, right?
They, I've never seen so many stray dogs in one country in my life, but every single one of those dogs is well fed, not scared of anybody because nobody kicks them, nobody tells them to move. You can walk around shopping precincts and the dogs are just asleep on the pavement everywhere.
Yeah,
They're fantastic, and they have a day of the dog thing where they just celebrate dogs.
totally makes sense. Well, Mark, this has been amazing, and I really appreciate you having the courage to share this with us. And it was a fascinating story.
Thank you, Arthur.
Um,
Thank you. Let me do it.
yeah, you're very welcome, and I'm certain of this: there will be people who hear this in our community and audience that will appreciate, and at very least appreciate, but you may hear from them not only to thank you, but give you some help.
Yeah, I am more than happy for you to give my contact details to anybody that wants help.
Yeah, I'll make
And
sure I do.
if they did want to read the book, it's on Amazon, so you can find it on Amazon.
I just hit the send button. I think I'll have it in 2 days.
I could have sent you one.
No, 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 no. I appreciate you saying that. I just, when we first spoke, I said I was going to do it. I put it in my shopping cart and I didn't hit send till today.
That's
So
okay.
yeah,
Could be terrible. You never know. As long as I can keep helping people, and for me, my life could be very successful if I can get people to call it an injury and not a discipline.
yeah. I
Then,
think
then
you're on the
people will
way to
come
it.
forward.
Yeah. Super appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Arthur.
Mark.
Thank you again for letting me on. I really appreciate the
You're
time.
very, very welcome. Thank you
Thank you,
and
sir.
we'll let McGenna know too. She
Thank
was
you.
great. Okay. Thank you, Mark.